faculty and staff, especially Ken Mitchell. Thank you for all your help and support with this faculty and staff. This event is made possible thanks to the Peter T. Paul Innovation Fund, the Dean's Office, and the Marketing Department. We have a few Zoom rules that we ask you to abide. First, please have your video on. Second, please have your microphone muted. Lastly, any questions you have in the chat, Ali McPhee, one of our amazing board members, will be collecting and asking the questions that you guys put in the chat today. We also want to thank our guest speakers. I would like to extend a warm welcome and to thank all of our guest speakers who have come here to share their insights and experiences with us today. We will be hearing from industry leaders from Ogilvy, Boston Red Sox, Timberland, Duncan, Infinity, Root Connect, Clark's, Vital, and Sharp Ninja. This event cannot happen without you all, and we are so grateful you are here with us today. Next, I want to recognize SMAC's Board of Directors, Matthew Morrison, Vice President, Ali McPhee, Director of Events, Lexi Houghton, Secretary, Donald Korse, Director of Fundraising, Jack Kramer, Director of Marketing, Mehdi Orugi, Treasurer, Pinar Golpap, Director of Development, Amanda Zubricki, Director of AMA. Additionally, we would like to thank Diane Devine, our faculty advisor. Our continued success as a club is greatly contributed to you. We want to thank you for everything you do for MAC. Throughout the year, and especially leading up to the event, the team's been working hard to make sure our members have the best possible experience with the club. We are pleased to present a full schedule of events. It started this morning with the Real World Business Challenge presentations, where students presented their marketing plans for local businesses. Our keynote speaker will be presenting shortly from 10 to 11 a.m., followed by our first panel of industry leaders from 11 to 12 p.m. From 12 to 1 p.m., recruiters from 8 companies will be meeting with students one-on-one. This will be followed by our second panel of marketing professionals and Paul College alums. At the end of each event, we will share with you a Qualtrics link in the chat for you to answer some fun trivia questions where you can win some swag from some of the brands that are here with us today. So please make sure to enter to win. Lastly, we will finish the day with some closing remarks and announce the Real World Business Challenge and the trivia contest winners. Now I am pleased to introduce this year's keynote speaker, Christopher Graves. Christopher is president and founder of Ogilvy Center for Behavioral Science. Christopher has a very successful and prestigious career. Prior to this position, Chris served as global CEO and chair of Ogilvy Public Relations and served 2 terms as the Public Relations Industry Chair. In his first career, he worked as a top news media executive at the Wall Street Journal and CNBC for more than 20 years. He has been awarded various honors, including 4 annual Atticus Awards honors, named a top 25 innovator in the US, and named to the Hall of Fame by both Campaign Asia and the International Communications Consultancy Organization, and was elected life member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So please give a warm virtual welcome to our keynote speaker, Christopher Graves.
Thank you, thank you. I hope everybody can hear. I'm gonna go on to screen share. We're gonna have a roller coaster ride. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me right now. Yeah, okay. Well, first, a huge thank you to Professor Diane Devine. And talk about marketing. Oh my God, could you have a better name than Divine? Who's your teacher? She's divine. Unbelievable. So we're going to go through a roller coaster session, things that might usually take days, weeks, maybe months or years or decades, and we're going to compress it into the next hour. So I hope you'll hang with me. And along the way, I might look at the list of participants and just zing a question at somebody. So pay close attention. You'd hate to be called out and embarrassed at that moment. And there will be a couple of points when we actually have survey questions. So if you're ready to rock, here we go. Let's see if my screen share will work. Bingity bangity boom. And we're gonna go on to full screen. So far, so good. So listen, what I'm gonna take you through is the real why and the hidden who of moving people. When you market, it really is about, of course, storytelling and influence, but you're moving people. You're moving them closer to you or to a new perception. And really, there is a science of doing that, way beyond the data that you all should be quite savvy about, and analytics. That's important. But there's a behavioral science to moving what is ostensibly an incredibly irrational species. That's you. That's me. I suspect most of you are human. There could be some deep fakes on today, so we'll keep an eye out for them. If you're ready to go, I'm going to show you the first example. And I'd like you to pay close attention to this because it illustrates something very important. Are you ready? Give me a thumbs up, Kyle. Yeah, baby. Here we go. Forgive me. First things first, before we share, we're going to need to set up to make sure that the audio is ready. There we go. Fantastic. And we'll try that again and see if you can hear this. Give me a thumbs up. Hang on. Great.
Mermelada, por favor.
Sí, mi amor. Ten.
Gracias.
De nada.
So what the heck is going on there? There's a woman running for her life, hiding in the forest, in the dark, in the fog. And then a child comes out of the dark and says, "Could you open this jar for me?" Well, what's going on was a beautiful illustration of what behavioral scientists call narrative transportation. Narrative transportation is a science in its own right. And it's something as marketers, communicators, you need to learn as well. And so what I've done is distilled down to 6 keys that I'm going to take you through to how you can engineer narrative transportation. Because you see, that child was right there in her house. She wasn't in a forest. She was reading a book. She was transported by reading that book. And that marketing was for a bookstore chain called Gandhi Bookstores. So to get going here, to launch these 6 principles, let's start with the unexpected. And let me give you one more example from the remarkable work done for this bookstore chain.
Ahora sí te va a cargar la huesuda.
Yo no fui.
¿No?
No, yo
¿No fuiste?
No, yo no.
¡No!
Again, he is totally transported. This is this guy at home. He's reading his book. He's become a character in the story. He's about to get executed out in the dark, and bing bong, the pizza arrives. So why is this crucial, this form of surprise, the unexpected? Because your brain is wired to begin out of efficiencies to just stop paying attention to things that are routine. You know, how many times have you driven, those of you who can or are old enough to drive, and you've just forgotten that you drove home because it's so automatic? It's what's, called your system 1, as Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, calls it. Your system 1 is the automatic part of your brain. And your marketing, unfortunately, can become automatic, which is not a good thing. And so you need to weave in elements of the unexpected and the surprise, because all the brain science shows we learn better, we remember better, and we're moved better when you give me an element of surprise. The next one is a biggie, and it's emotion. This was an incredible study done by Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist, and Hannah Damasio, another scientist, his wife. And what they were looking to discover was, how do humans really, in the brain, what happens when humans make a decision, shape an opinion? And they wondered if you can isolate that in the brain. Is there a way to figure out exactly what's going on where? And they did. And that has stuck now for nearly 20 years. And what they found were that there are two parts of the brain that are crucial. These two parts are behind every decision your audience, your customers make. And here they are. The first is called the amygdala. Now, the amygdala are kind of walnut sized. There are two of them, left and right, deep down into the earliest evolved part of the brain. And they are the original fight or flight part of the brain. They're the reason, our ancestors ran away or killed. They're the reason you're here now, because that fight or flight center is that crucial. But then there's a more contemplative, reflective part called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, straight through there. And it makes sense of those raw signals from the amygdala, because if you just were whipsawed by everything that caught your attention, that's actually called an ADHD hijack. And so they really work together like a partnership. And yet, one of the two is the senior partner. One of the two has much more power than the others. Can you guess which of the two? Maybe in chat, if you can guess, and you don't have to write out the whole ventromedial prefrontal cortex. You can just write VPC or A, make it very fast. If you have access to chat there, go ahead and see if you can guess which of the two is the senior partner in this. Diane, if you can see chat, read out a few of them for me. I'm not seeing chat here.
Most are saying A.
A, what a brilliant crowd you've got. It is A. And because it is A, amygdala, this means that emotion is super powerful in all of your marketing. If you don't have emotion, it's not going to work. And so Damasio said, we are not thinking machines. Descartes was not right on this. When he said, I think, therefore I am, he said, no, we are feeling machines that think. And so when you think about marketing, advertising, PR, where is the emotion in what you are doing?
It was 5 days before Christmas. I will never forget that. I went for a regular 20-week checkup to see how the baby was doing. They said, your daughter has a half a heart. Her heart is damaged beyond repair. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? And she said, yes, there's nothing we could do to help your daughter. New York Presbyterian Hospital said, yes, we'll take her. And yes, they did. We knew that Jenna would need a heart transplant. Dr. Badger actually said, you have to do the 3 surgeries to give her a fighting chance. Everybody else gave up. They never gave up. I would tell the entire New York Presbyterian Hospital, you guys are our angels. You guys are always there for Jenna.
Not your typical hospital ad talking about gleaming facilities, high tech, trustworthy doctors. It gets really to the heart of it with 2 huge behavioral science principles in storytelling. One is, of course, the emotion that you saw, but the other, we'll see if you can guess, that you're going to learn about in just a few minutes. Here's another one. Now, you can do the same thing in tech, and it doesn't always have to involve tears, though my daughter's name is Sophie, and this one got me crying a few times.
Are you ready for your big party today? Huh?
could have talked about, imagine the brief for this ad, if you were briefing. They could have had a choice where they talked about the seamless interoperability of digital and social media platforms for a great experience, and you wouldn't have cared. But instead, they tell you the story of one father chronicling the life of one daughter as she's growing up. And those simple human milestones are so moving. So even with something like tech, you can infuse it with emotion. The next one is concreteness. And this is a huge one, and one that people don't talk about so much, but it's very, very powerful. Now let me show you where, from a neuroscience point of view, where it gets its roots. This is Giacomo Rizzolatti. Now he had a pandemic hairstyle before COVID. He's rocking the comb over, but I gotta tell you, Giacomo Rizzolatti is a giant. In 1992, at the University of Parma in Italy, he and his team were trying to make a huge neuroscience breakthrough. And this is what they were doing. They were wondering if you could map the neurons. Those are the electrical transmitters in your brain. Your brain is really 3 or 3.5 pounds of jello. That's not what thinks or makes you smart or feels. It's the neurons that fire inside your brain. So he was wondering if you could map them. Could you map, every time I do this, are they the same neurons or are they different neurons? It was huge and nobody had tried to map it. And so he had some rhesus macaque monkeys and he put little probes into their brain to try to get closer and closer to isolating specific neurons for a very specific task. And that specific task was this. Every time a monkey took a little monkey food treat and put it up to its mouth, he wanted to isolate the neurons that would fire when it did it. And he wanted to find out, are they the same neurons? Do they fire in clusters? And indeed, he found it, and they did. And it would sound like this. They put audio up on the lab so that they could track it every time. And so every time a monkey would take a treat, you'd hear it. It sounds like a little Geiger counter. It sounds like tick, 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 like this. Except one day, a funny thing happened. One of his team came back from a lunch break and stole a monkey treat and decided to taste it himself and heard this. What the heck is that? Remember, the monkey had the probe, not the human. And so when the human ate, the monkey watching the human fired the same neurons as though the monkey were eating the food. It was kind of an ultimate voyeuristic experience. And at that moment, they discovered what is now called mirror neurons. They are the thing that separate higher primates and humans from everything else. They are the roots of empathy. I can watch and I can feel from watching. This is huge. And then I tracked down this guy. Thought he might have been a mad scientist at first. And then when I met him, I was certain he is a mad scientist, but he's a brilliant mad scientist. He's at Princeton. His name is Yuri Hassan. And what he decided to do was to see whether there's a kind of relationship with these mirror neurons between storytellers and story listeners. And so he would put somebody in a brain scanner and he would play back to them the audio of another person from a brain scanner telling a story. And he would record both their brain patterns and see, did they mirror each other or were they just completely individual and different? And what he saw was as the speaker was speaking, the listener was echoing that in the brain patterns with a slight delay. Speaker proceeds, and then as they got deeper into the story, they got synchronous, meaning that at the same time, their brains were firing exactly the same way in the middle of the story. And then with a really good story, what he found was that the listener could accurately mirror the teller before they told the next line of the story. How powerful is that? It takes that saying, getting somebody on the same wavelength, and makes it literal. But not just any story can do that. It takes a concrete effect in a story. And by concreteness, we mean it's a kind of opposite of abstraction. Concreteness is something that is so vivid when I tell you, you can picture it yourself. And that's where many marketers go wrong. That's certainly where corporations go wrong in corporate communications. They speak in abstractions. They don't write or speak in concrete fashions that people themselves can take charge of the story and let it ignite their own brains with the imagery. This science is going on and on. It's well worth following up. But the reason this is true is that the concreteness is treated through a different channel in the brain from abstraction. And when you treat concreteness in the brain, it is not only faster, you can understand it better, and you believe it more. So if you want to foster belief in something, abstraction won't get you there. Here are a couple of examples.
Wake up, honey. You have a test?
Tomorrow, yeah.
I've got to stay at the office till about 6:30 tonight.
No, they'll swim for us.
Thanks, Mom.
Lunch is there.
Love you.
Bye, sweetheart. Have a good day.
Now, most people, when they talk about climate change, talk in terms of big abstractions. And humans don't care much about abstraction. And here's another thing. No matter what people may tell you, humans as a species don't care about the future. It's called temporal discounting. And we always bump out future concerns with today or this minute. We may profess we care about the future, but when push comes to shove, we really are wired to be very much in the urgent present. So talking about something with future consequences can be quite abstract, and people don't care a lot about most climate change communications. But making it visceral, making it concrete is a whole different thing. It's also true when you think of the environment in another facet of the environment. Take a look at this.
I'm one with the river, guided gently by her stream to a shoreline in the distance. The bright lights on the shoreline, someone after me. To them I give no resistance.
So of course you could think of the many different ways you might market Brita filters for the water that you take out of your tap and drink. But to make this visceral, concrete imagery of all the bottles you do not use when you use a Brita filter is far more memorable and far more compelling. Now, another way to bring concreteness to abstraction or things that are really difficult to convey is to figure out a metaphor, an analogy, a schema, something people already know that is concrete, even though what you're talking about is quite abstract. Let's see how long it takes for you to figure this one out.
I think I was always misunderstood. People just didn't seem to like me. I think I annoyed them. I got on their nerves. I don't know why. That's just the way it was. Yeah. Maybe I was too intense. Maybe I came on too strong. I don't know. I really can't say. Yeah, it was lonely. Really lonely. But you get used to it after a while. And then, one day, everything changed. Somebody finally accepted me for what I am. Since I've got this job, life is completely different. I finally feel useful, good at something.
What an elegant metaphor. I could have imagined the brief for this one if you were doing this as an ad and you wanted to talk about the kilowatts that a wind turbine creates and how green it is and all those kinds of things. But instead it was done as this lyrical, nearly poetic, sad, ultimately uplifting tale of a lonely, misunderstood giant, the wind, that everybody sees as trouble or an irritant. And yet actually when you give the wind its proper job, everything works better. I took concreteness to heart when working with WHO and UNICEF and many others. I work in vaccine hesitancy, combating vaccine hesitancy, have done so for 4 years, but especially now that we have these super lightning fast created new vaccines and in ways that people had not seen before, like mRNA vaccines. And one of the things that you discover is some of the hesitancy from really smart people, these are not conspiracy believers, are just like, maybe I'll wait and see because these vaccines seem like they were made really fast. And one of the things you can do to allay those fears is to show how a vaccine works. Because most people, frankly, don't know how a vaccine works. A lot of people I ask are certain they know, and when they tell me, they don't know. So what I decided to do is take a schema, something that people already understand, the characters they already know, like Darth Vader and Yoda or Jedi Knights, and do quick explanations. So imagine the coronavirus is Darth Vader. And this vaccine, this viral fragment vaccine, how many vaccines work, takes only the helmet, the harmless empty helmet of Darth Vader. And that's enough to teach our Jedi Knight how to create antibodies to beat the real Darth Vader. But these empty helmets don't give you coronavirus because they're just an empty helmet. They're not the full Darth Vader. And so with viral fragment vaccines, the same thing happens. The vaccine includes tiny, just pieces of the virus, but not enough of the virus to actually give you the disease, just enough to fool your body, to train your body to create the proper antibodies to build immunity. Another way a vaccine works is a weakened virus. They take the virus and they kill it or they weaken it. It's kind of like putting a child in a Darth Vader costume. That's not going to hurt you, but it will fool your body just enough to turn it into a Jedi Knight to beat the real virus. And I've done several of these, including for mRNA, but it's a way, and it's a great thing for you to try, is take something really difficult to convey, and instead of using the language of science or the language of medicine, use the language of cartoons or sports or something that people already understand, and transpose keys. It makes them much more comfortable because now they actually do understand. So let's move on to the next one, which is struggle. A lot of companies are frightened of struggle in marketing and communications. And yet you can't name a memorable book, movie, or short story that did not have heaps of struggle. Struggle is what lends meaning to human existence. Let me give you an example and see if you can identify some of the principles we've already talked about inside this story.
Patients that we're treating on this clinical trial have absolutely no other options left for them. These are patients who are unfortunately destined to die of their disease and in a fairly short amount of time.
Emily Whitehead, 554.
So Emma is incredibly matter-of-fact about all of this stuff. This was a child who had had her leukemia come back twice. The parents were looking for a miracle.
What we've learned how to do is train the immune system to recognize and then kill tumor cells.
It's a procedure where we collect their T cells, and they are infected with a virus that will genetically change them so that they will now see and react against their leukemia cells.
And we actually use the HIV virus to do that.
So you're taking the HIV virus and infecting healthy cells with it to help kill cancer?
Yes. The virus has been engineered so that it can't cause disease anymore. But it still retains the ability to reprogram the immune system so that it will now attack cancer cells. We call those modified immune cells serial killer cells. Each infused cell can kill more than 1,000 different tumor cells.
But the reality is the dramatic responses of cancer to new treatments are very unusual. We need to make it clear when we talk to a family that it may not work. Emma was given her T-cell treatment, and within a few days, she was very sick. She had breathing difficulties, she had blood pressure difficulties. We knew that she could not have gotten any sicker without actually dying.
But then a remarkable thing happened. The T cells were growing, they were starting to fight the cancer.
Within hours, Emma's fever disappeared.
It was like the calm after the storm. The clouds went away, and she woke up and there was no leukemia. When that child survived, it was, of course, an amazing event.
Did you see how that doctor struggled to not be emotional? When he said, when that child woke up, it was an amazing event. He struggled for the word and wanted to keep it as neutral and as scientific as possible, as his eyes completely filled with tears. So this was a wonderful story of struggle. When again, if you think of medical marketing, it often gets back to very techno speak, medical jargon, and this was so human about a struggle at so many levels. Engineering cells to become serial killer cells, taking something as horrible as HIV and making it a hero. It was an incredible story. Which leads us to the next one, because that story, you notice, is really about one little girl, one individual. And when you tell a story, the behavioral science tells us what is the right way, what is the effective way, and what is not when you cast that story. And it really comes down to making sure that your story focuses on one single identifiable individual at a time. The moment you add a second, third, or data, or a village, or a cluster, you lose people. It has to be about one single individual at a time. Now, if you want to look up more, all three of these scientists and others have done loads of studies on this to show that this principle holds true. And here's an example. You know, the refugee crisis had been big for a long, long time, been in the news, been on front pages around the world. And frankly, not many people cared until this. And when this happened, the entire world put that drowned little boy on their front page, and the issue became compelling for everybody. It's originally called the identifiable victim effect. I've kind of renamed it because it doesn't have to be a victim. It can be a happy story as well, but you must focus on one individual at a time. Now, there's a pitfall in that. If the individual I choose as my casting for my central character is really unlikable to you, and you have no empathy or sympathy for that character, it doesn't work so well. So there's a kind of casting about that messenger or about the focus of the story that must fit the audience that you're talking to. So sometimes you need a cast. And I'm going to show you what this looks like in competing service offerings. This happens to be an retirement insurance offering, and was in the marketplace at the same time. And two very different examples. One hired a behavioral scientist to help them make the ad and the campaign, and the other did not. I'm going to show them to you back to back, and we'll see if you can guess which one was using behavioral science.
Americans believe they should be in charge of their own future, how they'll live tomorrow. For more than 116 years, Ameriprise Financial has worked for their clients' futures, helping millions of Americans retire on their terms, when they want, where they want, doing what they want. Ameriprise, the strength of a leader in retirement planning, the heart of 10,000 advisors working with you one-to-one, together for your future.
That's number one. Here's number two.
In the Latino community, we don't have a word for retirement. The word that we use is jubilation. I feel that everyone has a purpose in life. My purpose? I am an agent of culture, music, and art. I had always been involved with music in one way or another. I did my first recording when I was 15, and I felt that I might have gone into music full time. And then when I had my son, I wanted to have a more normal 9-to-5. So I deferred my dream. And I went into public relations, corporate public relations, from 1984 till like today. Public relations was very good to me. I raised my son. I got my mother out of the projects. I helped my entire family. I supported a few boyfriends. I mean, money was not a question. But money does not give you the kind of satisfaction. It doesn't complete you. I think getting cancer focuses your life. I had been with my husband maybe 4 years, and I remember when I came home, I sat here, and he was against that wall, and I told him, listen, this is gonna be a long, dark journey for me, and I told him, you don't have to do it with me. I won't blame you if you leave. And he came up to me and he kneeled right there and he took my hand and he said, if you have cancer, I have cancer too. Now, I don't have cancer, but it kind of put everything, my whole life in perspective as to what was important for me and what was not. I really knew definitively that I wanted to retire from the stress of the corporate world. What I'm doing now with the band, I want to be able to travel around the world and showcase my music. I'm the band leader. My husband is the musical director. My band spans from 18 to 70, and I love that. The older guys keep the young ones reined in until it's time for them to let loose. And you create a crescendo of sounds that peaks. You have to build the audience up slowly and then leave them so that when you leave the stage is smoking hot and people are screaming and they want more.
So Vicky Parker, I see in chat, yes, you nailed it. I think it's clear that the second one is infused with a combination of emotion, that identifiable individual, Aurora Flores. I'm looking in chat now. Does anybody remember what her apartment number was? What apartment number? Look at that, everybody did. Now think of marketing that is not memorable, which is 99% of marketing. You all knew what apartment she lived in even. This is the power of a very human story, rich in detail, this concreteness effect. And the other thing that was amazing is, you know, her whole jubilation, as she called it, and in the Latino community, the word for retirement, for her, it's so much about music and sharing music. How many times did you hear the audio track of her band? How many times? The answer is 0, because the score for the ad was not her band at all, of course, and you could tell it was not her band, and she listened in silence, but you in your brain could fill in that blank. It really pulled you into it. So I just think it's a marvelous example of taking something that could be quite dry, maybe even scary or dreadful, like retirement insurance, and just bringing such humanity to it. Okay. The next one, and our last of the 6, is a killer. You remember I said earlier that you probably need to, in fact, you definitely need to match your messenger or your example to a community that can identify with it. Most people tune out if they don't identify with your messenger or the cameo or the central role that you're casting there. So identity becomes huge. We've seen the power of identity as this country comes apart at the seams, and other countries and other cultures. Identity for humans is that powerful. And let me tell you something about a pandemic. It's my 3rd pandemic to live through. I lived through SARS in Hong Kong, where we thought the entire city was going to die. I lived through the avian flu in Asia, where they didn't know how to put that down. And now, of course, COVID. But what happens to humans when you bring a big, looming existential threat to people is what behavioral scientists call mortality salience. Mortality salience. What it means is it brings your own eventual death to your mind, even if it's a bit subliminal. And when you do that to people, they become extreme versions of their prior selves. If they were a little bit like this, they become hugely like this now. And this is what you're seeing in America in terms of people who you might not have paid any attention to in the past becoming enemies, becoming extreme caricatures of their prior selves. This is the power of a looming threat, whether it's a 9/11 terrorist act, or which tended to bond people because that came from so far from an identifiable outside, but something that seems to come up from inside creates this kind of thing. it polarizes us identity. And so when you think about marketing, think about companies taking a stand. I know you've got great companies that have taken stands who are going to speak today. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to get on board with their point of view or stand. Look at the Super Bowl and look at what happened when the boss, Bruce Springsteen, tried to do an ad about coming together in the middle and immediately was mocked, not just because of the DUI charge, but because there is no middle, people say. When we look at the US election this last year through the eyes of TV, Modern Family, the map on the left, is where the ratings are highest for Modern Family. Duck Dynasty on the right, where it's darker, or where the ratings are highest for Duck Dynasty. Can you see that they're basically negatives of each other? And when you look at the Electoral College map in the middle, can you see how it mirrors that? There's something called the Cracker Barrel Whole Foods split that behavioral scientists study in America. And it's getting wider and wider, this split. In 1992, for the Bill Clinton election, there was a sizable crossover of this. And what it means is this: if I'm running for president, what percentage of counties do I win from each of these counties that have a Cracker Barrel versus counties that have a Whole Foods? Because they tend to not overlap a lot geographically. They do, but not a ton. And that has been splitting and splitting and splitting farther apart. If you look at the bottom on the left and you see Clinton, it wasn't hugely different between the counties he won, which had Cracker Barrel, versus the counties he won, it had Whole Foods. And now it's getting, when you look at the top with Biden, or if you look at the gap on the right, bigger and bigger. It's showing up in our own culture. And of course, it shows up in brands and in marketing. And I'm going to show you how it feels so different here.
Homestyle cooking brings family together. At Cracker Barrel Old Country Store, we offer all kinds of different choices to help you do just that. From chicken and dumplings to roast beef, even breakfast for dinner. Because pleasing people has always been part of our recipe. So stop on by. You're always welcome.
And now, Whole Foods.
I hear you have a degree in cheese.
I do. I went to cheese school.
I'd like to go to cheese school.
They know their markets. They know the difference in the sensibilities. And you will need to too, because as we get more polarized, fewer and fewer brands actually cross everywhere. It's a very tough decision for a lot of brands now when they're told you must take a stand on big issues. And then they worry, well, if I do take a stand, will I become part of that polarization, part of that divide? And so when we came up against COVID and this pandemic, you may remember every single ad said, we're all in this together. If you don't remember, just have a look.
And we'll get through this. Together.
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 Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Well, didn't really turn out that way, did it? And I'm going to show you as we race toward the finish here, some new lenses to decode what I call the sense-making genome. As you go through your marketing, to be able to decode individuals at scale, you need to understand where the landmines are, where the opportunities are by decoding people in a new way. So when you look at something called worldview, out of Yale, there's a wonderful deep body of research called the Cultural Cognition Project at Yale. And they've basically evolved an earlier field of studies called culture theory or grid group theory, and it begins to decode things. And I'm going to ask you to look at this, and now you're going to get a poll that's going to come on screen for you to choose. You will be choosing one of A versus B, and you'll be choosing 1 versus 2. Here it comes. And we'll see what the results are. Go for it. And we'll see as that tallies up, and we'll show you some results. Take your time, read them. Try not to do impression management. Try not to answer in a way you think is right. It's anonymous. Answer in a way you think makes sense to you. And when we have those results, let's go ahead and show folks. Okay, so it looks like question 1 and 2 are fairly close, but 2 is a little ahead. And similarly with question 1, and then similarly with question 2. I'm really, really delighted to see the diversity of responses there, because let me show you actually what that means. This is the science of cultural cognition. You see the two axes, the vertical one, hierarchical versus egalitarian, and the horizontal one, individualistic versus communitarian. And here's what it means. If you think about the top, hierarchical, it's people who believe that things work best when there's order in the form of a hierarchy, a clear, strong leader, and a clear order below that. So for example, you don't just say, I work there. You say, I'm a VP or a senior VP or an executive VP, or if you're in the military, it matters what your rank is. So this is not about judgment of any of these. For those who are believers and believe the world works best with a hierarchical construct, they believe you need a strong leader and a strong order. It may even be a book club. Who's in charge this week? Then at the bottom, egalitarian that's just turns their stomach. They don't want any hierarchy at all. They really feel much more comfortable with sort of, a collaborative, consensus-driven approach to things. Now, if you look at the horizontal axis on the far left, individualistic folks believe that all accountability and responsibility for your outcomes reside with you. They don't believe so much in government or social safety nets or things like that to care for you. Listen, if life sucks for you, do something about it, is how they feel. Very entrepreneurial, very grit, resilient kind of approach to the world. Meanwhile, on the far right, the communitarians believe that the community takes precedence over individuals. What's best for the community may not be best for you, but that's too bad, because we're about community. We're not about individuals. And so you can see, as you flesh out each one of those boxes where they come together, it gets like pixels in a portrait, where you're beginning to understand what motivates people in ways they may not be able to articulate to you. If you look at the hierarchical individualists, they really are more moved and more comforted by tradition, traditional social values, law and order, authority, family. They love competition, and especially free markets without too many ham-handed regulations. Now, I'm not going to go through them all, but let's look at their opposites, the diagonal bottom right, where they're very much believing that the current way we live is not fair, that things need to change, that society is clearly, there are inequalities, inequities, that the gaps need to be closed on so many fronts, and we've got to protect the vulnerable and put the disadvantaged first, so that we can create more equality in society. And so you begin to see that if you're strongly wired with these things, you use that as a kind of filter. And this, you can imagine, has all kinds of effects. So for those of you who answered number 1, you were closer to being hierarchical. And remember, this is on a spectrum. It's not a all in or nothing necessarily. But if you answered number 1, you were closer to being hierarchical. If you answered number 2, more egalitarian. If you answered A, you were more individualistic. And if you answered B, you were more communitarian. And if you look through history and politics, or even TV, you can begin to see how that shakes out. For example, for those of you who may have caught Gillian Anderson playing Margaret Thatcher did say this, not just Gillian Anderson. She famously said, "There's no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families. And then, of course, if you look at her opposite from a worldview point of view, Michelle Obama, you can see the huge opposites here. And of course, Ron Swanson in the bottom left, you all know him as a character. And he said, the less I know about other people's affairs, the happier I am. Deal with your problems yourselves, like adults. And so this doesn't make anybody bad or selfish. This is how we're wired to make sense of the world. And when you think about marketing, are you thinking about that? And how do you decode this? I mean, aren't we all in this together? Well, imagine I redid the grid based on pandemic. And if you look at hierarchical and individualistic folks, they tend to not want to kill the economy. They'd like to protect the jobs, you know, and don't let the cure be worse than the disease. And you know, you take individual accountability. If you want to wear a mask, fine, but don't make me wear a mask. And then if you look at the bottom right, you can see how it's so different. So it gives you an empathetic way of decoding people rather than a divisive way filled with hatred, and should inform how you engage and how you communicate. Now, I'm going to race through the end here, and I'm not going to talk about all of these, but pick just a few. But these are a few of the dozens of ways you can and should use to decode people before you talk to them, whether it's PR or whether it's advertising and marketing. And one of them is locus of control. Locus of control is on the external locus of control. It's if you feel that the control about what impacts your life is really kind of outside you. It might be I travel too much to work out, for example, or it's in my genes, or I'm up against bureaucracy. Whereas the internal locus of control is more like a Steve Jobs who really doesn't care what people think in focus groups. He's just going to do what he thinks is right. So what do you think this person is in this marketing?
You know who likes to be in control? This guy. Check it out. Self-appendectomy. Oh, that's really attached. That's why I rent from National, where I get the control to choose any car in the aisle I want, not some car they choose for me. Which makes me one smooth operator. Still a little tender. Go National. Go like a pro.
Clearly, he's internal locus of control, all about he has the control. Now, when you're thinking about marketing, are you thinking about whether your product or service is for people who need more comfort and support, like external locus of control? Or is it for really people who just take control of things like he did? It's an important differentiation when you segment and when you create personas in marketing. Quick flash survey, last one, here we go. Which is closer to how you feel? Again, pick between A and B or between 1 and 2, and we can put up the poll and you can read the questions on the poll and answer there. There we go. On question 3, it's more important to get it right and to make safe and smart decisions rather than risking mistakes. Or I really go for it, even if it means risking mistakes. That's how you achieve big goals. Now, be honest with yourself. In question 4, growing up, I obeyed the rules and felt uncomfortable being around somebody who broke the rules and risked getting into trouble. Or growing up, I often pushed the limits and got into trouble for it. Hey, you only live once. Now, Professor Devine and I have daughters who went to boarding school, and so we lived through this, and I won't divulge which one of those my daughter was, but they're very different. So if you look at it here, very interesting, on question 3, slightly more of the, I really go for it, but it's not a huge gap. There is a really big gap on the other one. Growing up, I obeyed the rules and felt uncomfortable. And this is really important too, because particularly I do a lot of marketing in the realm of pharma and health and medical. And it's really important to know whether your audience is external or internal in their locus of control. Let me clear my screen on this here. And this is what it means. So there's something called regulatory focus. And you're either wired to be more promotion or prevention in your outlook to life. A promotion is really going for it, play to win. A prevention is more defensive, playing not to lose. And it's not right or wrong, believe me. So if you answered B and 2, you're more promotion oriented. If you answered A and 1, you're more prevention. You may have had a little bit of mix and match because you may be closer to the middle. But think about how you frame things in marketing. When you're talking to a promotion person, it needs to be what is called a gain frame. In other words, if you do this or if you buy this, whoa, good things could happen. When you're talking to a prevention person, you need to say, if you don't do this, possibly bad things could happen. And you see this in pharma marketing and health and medical marketing quite a bit. So finally, to finish up, now that you're a behavioral scientist marketer, now that you know it all about narrative transportation, you can see that with these tools, absolutely anyone can craft a great story. Let's watch.
Okay, that was great, guys. Really great. The fire should be higher. You were amazing. Let's do another one.
D'où vient ma passion pour le cinéma?
Like an explosion.
Boom. Je crois que j'ai toujours aimé le cinéma. Le travail avec les acteurs.
I know.
And after, les effets spéciaux.
Can add some explosion? Yeah, more explosions. That's always good.
He is an amazing director, very sensitive.
I don't give a shit! I want...
La mise en scène.
A wide shot like that. Castle burning, we like that. Everybody screaming, lot of blood, boom, explosion.
Le scénario.
Sorry, we're ready.
Yeah, come in. La musique. En fait, j'aime tout dans le cinéma. Vous savez, j'ai vu tellement de grands films depuis tant d'années qu'un jour je me suis dit, pourquoi pas moi?
Why not you? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much for your kind attention. And thanks so much to Professor Devine for asking me.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate it. I think Diane just sent out in the message that since we were a little bit over time, please reach out if you have any questions via the chat, and we will make sure to send them to Chris Graves afterwards. So thank you again for joining UNH today. So exciting. I'm actually going to send out a little quiz trivia link in the, here we go, in the chat. So a lot of people are sending things, so you might have to, I'll keep sending it, I guess, a few times so you can see it. So just fill those out, has some fun little questions.
If you want to capture them and send them, and I can send them back to Professor Devine, and she can, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I just hope that it fires up your imagination to start studying more the science of the marketing as well. And that's the whole point of it. So really go for it. Thank you all. Thank you for the nice comments. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chris.